I'm AJ Bianco from Podcast PD, a part of the Education Podcast Network, just like the show you're listening to now. Shows in the network are individually owned, and opinions expressed may not reflect others. Find other interesting education podcasts at edupodcastnetwork.com.
Coming up on episode number 143 of the House of EdTech podcast, I've got an EdTech recommendation for my favorite live streaming tool. I've got a just give it a try story to share, the House of EdTech VIP, and we're talking digital escape rooms with Mandi Tolen. Strike up the band. Welcome to the House of EdTech podcast. I am your host, Chris Nessie. The House of EdTech explores how technology is changing the way teachers teach and the impact that technology is having in education. I discuss technology that is changing our classrooms and schools, and I share tools and tips that you can hear today and use tomorrow. You're going to hear the stories of teachers, leaders, and creators just like you. The purpose? Whether you use it or not, technology is changing the way you teach and how your students learn. Man, I gotta tell you, boy, that beat and that music feels good. Welcome back to another episode of the podcast. So glad you're here. So glad you are making this podcast part of your anytime, anywhere professional development. If this is your first time listening, welcome aboard. If you're a returning listener, welcome back. I think you're going to enjoy this episode. Very excited. We're talking digital escape rooms today, and yeah, this is going to be good. My recommendation is solid. But before I get to that, let me tell you two things. First, we're going to go right to the feedback line, and I got a new feedback message. So let's hit the button.
You have one new message.
Hey Chris, it's Brian Carpenter from Canada, and I am just out for my walk. It's a rainy Saturday day. I'm listening to your podcast, and I just heard you talk about Twitter and EduTwitter and how it's about connection and people making connections on there and hearing responses. Sometimes I do agree with you. I feel the same way that, I put something out there and don't hear much response back, but that happens as we do get busier. No, I appreciate what you're doing, and I'm hearing what you're doing, so I just wanted to touch base and say, hey, you're doing a great job. I appreciate that. We did have a let's give it a try conversation as I was back in the spring doing something, and that's affected my thinking, and we even had a chance to connect. So if you're out there and you got a question, seriously, Chris will get back to you, and he'll make time for you. So thanks, Chris, for making time for me, and stay dry wherever you are. It's not too cold here, but it is pouring, as you can see. All right, take care. Happy Saturday.
Brian, thank you so much for sending in the feedback. I really appreciate that. And the fact that, I saw what you submitted on Flipgrid, and it was pouring. So, yeah. So, that it actually sounded really cool. If you're into sound and podcast, that was my first, I think it's my first weather on the podcast. So the rain actually sounded really cool, but man, was it downpouring on you. And yes, as Brian said, you reach out to me, I am going to make time for you. Because if I don't, then what am I doing? Why do any of this if you need me and I don't help you or don't make the effort or put you in touch with somebody who can, then I might as well stop. But hey, I'm not going to stop because I will make time for you. And speaking of making time for you in classic House of EdTech transition fashion, the last episode of the year is all about you and what you would like to share on the episode, because I do the annual House of EdTech Smackdown. You need to get your entry to me, though, by December 1st, 2019. Now, if you're listening to this after December 1st, 2019, or maybe it's 2020, because podcasts are funny like that, well, hey, know that the last episode of every calendar year is my Smackdown episode, where listeners submit their favorite EdTech tip, tool, recommendation, website, whatever the case may be. You submit that to me, and I share it here on the episode, and my goal is always to share as many voicemails and emails as possible. And I've already got one submission, and I certainly would love to have a lot more. So if you are on the fence, get off the fence and get over to your computer and go to chrisnessy.com/feedback and send me your submission. Again, let me know your favorite EdTech tip, tool, recommendation, website, a lesson, something you've done or tried, whatever the case may be. I want to hear what you've done here in 2019 even as I record this, we're starting to get ready for 2020, where I think everyone's vision is going to be perfect. So yeah, get me those submissions by December 1st, and I look forward to assembling that episode, which will come out before the end of 2019. Now, let's head over to this episode's featured content. I recently read a blog post on ditchthattextbook.com, hosted and published by the Matt Miller of Ditch That Textbook fame and Google Teacher Tribe superiority. And this past week, he had a guest blogger, Mandi Tolen, and Mandi is a high school math teacher from Missouri, and she wrote a blog post about digital escape rooms. And after I read it, I said, Self, you need to have her on the podcast. So I jumped at the chance to have her on the show and talk to you and me about digital escape rooms, which I want to start to use in my social studies classroom. And you might want to do that too if you've never done it. Now, if you have done it, let's listen to what Mandi shared with me, and I will tell you a little bit more after the conversation. But let's get to this conversation that I recently had with Mandi Tolen. How are you, Mandi?
I'm good. Thank you for having me.
Now, the reason I brought you in, and it's right in the title of this episode, we're talking about digital escape rooms. And being that this podcast is all about technology and education, this is really a nice intersection of both of those things. So that's what we're going to be talking about today. And this all stems from a blog post that you recently guest posted on my pal Matt Miller's blog, Ditch That Textbook. And it was all about how to create digital escape rooms. Let's start with, what is a digital escape room?
A digital escape room is much like the physical escape rooms that you go to. You have some sort of situation that the students are involved with, and you have to solve clues to break out of that room. So it's very similar to that, except it's in digital format.
Now, a listener might be familiar with Breakout EDU, which is, let's be honest, these really expensive boxes that have fancy locks and combinations and clues and some pre-made games. You mentioned before we hit record that you've done the physical ones. Can you talk a little bit about your experience with physical breakouts?
Sure. And that's actually where I started with the physical breakouts. And I started on the Breakout EDU website looking at some of the things that they had. And it's been a while, but when I started, they didn't have as many resources for math especially. And so I started creating my own, and students love them. I've created actually quite a few, and some for some birthday parties for my son. I mean, you can go outside the classroom with those. But then I noticed that especially my larger classes, my students couldn't all be involved with all of the puzzles. So while it was exciting to have that, they were still missing out on part of the element. It was around that same time that Breakout EDU also started kind of moving over into the digital realm. Just based on their idea of it, I was like, well, I think I can do this too. And that's when I created my first digital escape room.
What grade levels do you currently teach?
I teach 9 through 12 math.
That's a great age group to give them puzzles and things that will confuse them.
Oh, they love them. I used one in my classroom just yesterday.
Can you give us a little story? What's that all about? How do you use it in math?
Well, this one is called trianglesonly.com. It's a dating website for triangles. And we are talking about triangle congruence theorems and all of the properties that go with that. And so through this breakout, they are reviewing. So I used it in this class as a review, but they were reviewing some of those theorems and properties as they try to determine who their triangle is going to end up with.
That's awesome. Some people know, but I almost became a high school math teacher. So that really spoke to me. And real quick, the reason I didn't is because the math you take in college is never the math you're going to teach in high school. And I just wanted to teach high school math, but here I am teaching social studies. Yes. Now, so you teach high school, you teach math, but you've got experience making these games and sharing your knowledge. What grade levels and subject areas is a digital breakout appropriate for?
I actually just visited with a kindergarten teacher the other day, and we were brainstorming some ideas of how she could use this with her kindergarten students. Carly Mora and I have worked on these together, and she creates them for third through fifth grade and sometimes middle school students. So you can go any age group with a digital escape room.
That's what I want my audience. That's what I want a big takeaway to be, that it's not just a high school thing. It's not just for, young kid learners. This is really adaptable and can be made age appropriate based on the questions and puzzles and clues that you come up with, right?
Absolutely.
What do you think students get out of experiencing digital breakout? So what is the learning that a student experiences?
Well, other than the content that you can bury in these, because even when I did physical escape rooms or physical breakouts, they involved content that I wanted them to work with. But there's also some perseverance that's involved with it, not giving up. So even if you find the clue, you then have to figure out exactly how to put it in the lock. And that's the same with a physical lock or an electronic lock that you would have in one of these escape rooms. I sometimes pair my students up to work together, so then you have the teamwork aspect of it. So, there's a lot of things that happen with this, not just the content that they get out of it, but it is a really fun way to either introduce or review content as well.
You took the question right out. I was going to say, when would this be appropriate? So, I've seen a colleague of mine do it as a review, and you mentioned that you can also use it to introduce concepts.
You can. The very first digital escape room that I made was to introduce a data unit and some of the vocabulary. And so each of the clues took them to a site where they would learn about the vocabulary. And then that ended up being the locks that they had to enter to unlock the surprise at the end.
There's always a good surprise, right?
That's right. That's right.
Now, in the post that you had on Matt's blog, you talked about things that teachers should consider. So when a teacher who's listening to this decides, all right, this sounds good to me, I want to do this, and that's sort of me also saying that I want to do this, because I haven't done one yet. I've done the physical ones, like at ed camps and things, but, I want to do this. It just sounds so fun. What should I and any other teacher be considering when we want to plan this out? Because it's not just, go buy it and, find a pre-made thing. I want to make it for myself. So what do I need to think about?
Well, the first thing you want to think about is what's your purpose for this escape room. I do these for professional development as well. I did one for Christmas last year, and I have one, it's actually linked to Matt's blog post for Tech or Treat that we're doing at the end of this month. So which
is a great name, by the way, Tech or Treat. I love it.
Thank you. So through that, like for the PD for my teachers, I want them to learn technology concepts. So I, first of all, decide what exactly it is I want them to do. I get an idea of where I'm going to go with that. Then I develop a storyline that can deliver the content that I want. Same way in a classroom. I know what content I want for my students to get out of this, and then I develop that storyline and then all of the clues and everything that go with that. So the very first thing is, why are you making it? What's your purpose for doing this?
Now, when you say purpose, can somebody listening to this, me, is that like my objective in the lesson?
It could be your objective in the lesson, absolutely. Or objectives. So when I do it for a unit, it would be my learning targets that I had for my unit.
In the planning that goes into this, in the preparation, when you plan something out for students, do certain, and we'll stick with math because go with what you know.
Okay.
Do certain math topics lend themselves to this is some of it better for introducing concepts Are some digital breakouts better for reviewing? So how do you find that balance for you?
Honestly, I use it for either. I mean, I have sometimes started with a breakout or an escape room, and then at the end, the kids ask me again, can we use it as a review? I mean, I've done it both ways. As long as you have, like at the beginning, it has to be content that they can go find. So it can't be based on the knowledge that they have. If you're doing it as a review, that it can be purely based on the knowledge that they should have obtained from their unit. So, but like for my teachers, I'm assuming it's knowledge that they don't have. So I use that same strategy. I'm going to send them places where they can find this knowledge.
How long does it take to design a game from start to finish? Now, I would imagine that some factors are how many clues do you want to use, and depending on, again, what's your purpose is going to factor into that. But if you could talk about planning for using it for professional development for teachers, and what type of planning in terms of time goes into creating to use with students.
The first one that I made took me a while because, I mean, there are a lot of Google apps that are involved in it. And if you're not as familiar with it, that's a little bit of a learning curve. And just kind of figuring out with that first one, how everything is going to fit together on the screen. Once I got it together, I had to make some tweaks. Things weren't working exactly the way I wanted them to. So that first one, I probably spent a couple of evenings on it, working on it to get it the way that I want. Now when I sit down to write one, I can usually get one completed in a couple of hours if I know the learning targets ahead of time.
Again, you've mentioned the learning targets. When you sit down to write one, is your approach to work almost like backwards design? Are you working from the end of the game to the beginning, or do you start at the beginning and see what end you get to?
I usually have some things written out. I definitely want them to review these topics, or I definitely want them to explore these topics. And then as I write, I work my way through that and try to make sure that those end up in the game. Once you get to the end, every now and then it deviates just a little bit and you maybe come across something better that fits your story or fits what you're doing. But for the most part, I write those at the beginning and I can stick with it and make sure that I get those in my story.
Now, you've mentioned a little bit ago about there's a number of tools that can be used. So this is the House of Ed Tech, and we're talking about digital breakouts. What are some of the tools that you're using to make these digital breakouts?
Well, I'm going to actually start at the end. Some people are part to whole learners.
Wait, there's no puzzle I have to solve to do this, right?
There's no puzzle right now, no. So to start with the shell that you place this in, I like to use Google Sites. And when I first started creating these, it was in the old Google Sites. It was not nearly as user-friendly as it is now. With the Google Sites now, it is really just drag and drop right into the Google site, and you have everything you need right inside your Google Drive. So the Google site holds everything, and then you have a Google form, and that's what you're going to use as your lock to make sure that they can enter their locks. And then I always use a Google Drawing with hotspots. So I create an image, and it has the linkable hotspots on it that will take them then to the clues. So those are the three main ones that I use. A lot of times my clues will take them to a spreadsheet where they have to, do something with the spreadsheet to get a clue, or I will have some sort of puzzle that I've placed in Google Docs that they can work through. So I've incorporated some of those others as well.
Are there any tools that you like to create some of these clues and interact with that are outside of the Google sphere?
Absolutely. Almost every single one of the escape rooms that I create has a jigsaw puzzle, and Jigsaw Planet is by far my favorite. Another one that I like, and I can never remember the name of it when I go to tell people what it is, but it's this little weird spinny wheel, and it has words on it, and as you turn it, you see different words. The sad part about that is they limit how many you can have, and I have definitely exceeded that. Carly Moore and I have put together a Wakelet full of tons of resources, from fake text messages and fake newspaper clippings You can have receipts from restaurants, and I mean, you can create all of these things and embed clues in them as well.
Well, future Chris is going to put links to all of that in the show notes for this episode. So if he doesn't, I'm going to have a conversation with him. Going back to some of the games that you've created, you mentioned, the Google tools and some of these third-party tools that you're using to create. What's the clue you're most proud of that it was like, this is going to really stump them, or this is really going to challenge either the teachers or the students in terms of how the clue worked?
I like some of the ciphers that I have created. And there are different websites that you can do that. So you put the clue in and it creates the cipher, and then they have to find the clues through the cipher. And I think it was in the very first one that I created that had a cipher in it. And I saw students work for a very long time because I didn't give them the code, the key to unlock the cipher. It was in their reading. But they persevered and they found it. I did have some adults try it. They did not persevere quite as much as my students did, to be honest.
Yeah, perseverance is one of those things that leaves us over time, I guess. Well, Mandi, I have to say, one, again, thank you for taking time to be here on the show today. You have shared the tip of the digital breakout iceberg with us. So, of course, I'm going to link to the blog post where there's some great graphics and some more links to your work. And of course, I'll include all of that in the show notes. But for people who want to connect with you, and whether they're a math teacher or not, I mean, you're doing some great things with digital breakouts. So how can my listeners connect with you?
The best place to find me is on Twitter at Mandi Tolen EDU. I'm also on Instagram. I do have some educators that connect with me on Instagram. That is 4TsMom4 on Instagram. So those are the two best places.
Mandi, thank you again. And I'll have to bring you back on. This was a great conversation. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.
All right. Thank you once again, Mandi, for taking time to be here on the podcast. That was a great conversation. And this is me, future Chris, now recording the rest of this episode and putting it together. And I assure you that everything we talked about and the Wakelet that Mandi mentioned, everything can be found over at chrisnessy.com/143, and a link to the original blog post on Ditch That Textbook. If you haven't read that yet, definitely go read it. There's some great graphics. And of course, all the links to Mandi's resources that she shared here in our conversation. So if you've done escape rooms, digital or physical, I want to hear from you. I want to know what's worked, what hasn't worked, what should I be aware of, what should other people in our little community be aware of when they want to use this for instructional purposes. You can, of course, go out to the show notes at chrisnessy.com/143, and you can leave a comment on the show notes, or you can go to chrisnessy.com/feedback, and at any time, I will play that on a future episode of the podcast. Now, let's check out this episode's House EdTech recommendation. All right, today I want to talk about something I have talked about on the podcast before, and I first talked about StreamYard back on episode 130, which was the 2019 House of EdTech Final Four episode. There will, of course, be a link in the show notes if you missed that episode. But you listened to it, right? No, of course you did. Or if this is your first time, well, this is one of the ones you need to go back and listen to. But I digress. I want to talk about StreamYard again. As you may or may not be aware, Google Hangouts on Air went away earlier this year, and thus taking away the ease of live streaming to YouTube. Now, a lot of people would use Google Hangouts on Air to stream conversations or create other types of video content that was now readily available and easy to access via YouTube. A lot of people even conducted webinars this way. So, what is StreamYard? StreamYard is a live video production tool that is browser-based. So no downloads, and you don't need anything on your computer other than a webcam and a microphone to get started. But how do you get started? First, you're going to launch Chrome or any other supported browser, which include Firefox and Opera, and go to StreamYard.com. Connect a destination, which is someplace you want to live stream to, and the places you can stream to are Facebook profiles, Facebook groups that you are an administrator for, your YouTube channel, or Periscope. You can have up to 6 people in a stream with you, and up to 10 people can enter what they call the broadcast studio, so you can swap people in and out if you're doing some type of dynamic video or dynamic talk show. Guests don't have to sign up. They don't need to log in. Once you start your broadcast, you as the host are given a link that you can share out, whether it's Twitter, Facebook, an email, text message, whatever the case may be. You just need to send out the link, and people who want to join can click on the link. They don't have to log in. They don't sign up. They just go into like a digital green room, and then you can bring people into your live stream. If you pay, you have the ability to stream to multiple destinations simultaneously. So what does that mean? If you just use it for free, which is what I do, you can stream to one destination at a time. So I can stream to my Facebook profile, or I can stream to my group, but not both my public profile and the House of Ed Tech group. Or I can stream to just my YouTube channel or just Periscope, which I've done over the last couple of months once I kind of got on the StreamYard train. But if you pay, you can stream to multiple destinations at the same time. And if Facebook profiles, groups, YouTube, and Periscope aren't enough for what you want to do with live streaming content, they also give you the ability to live stream and send your stream to restream.io. And restream.io, if we want to do a little app smashing as we live stream, restream.io lets you stream video and broadcast to way more platforms. So through Restream, which I've played with a little bit, you can live stream to, Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, Periscope, Twitch, Mixer, and some other places that I can't even think of the names right now. But StreamYard could be your home base. And with a free Restream account, you can then stream to many, many locations. So if you have used it for streaming to YouTube, Facebook, or Periscope, I would certainly want to hear from you, because we are all better together. And in the times that I've done it, I haven't had any issues. So I definitely recommend, if you're interested in live streaming or doing some video content where you want to bring in people, certainly this is a great way to do it. And you want to go to StreamYard.com. And the nice thing is, if you do stream out to YouTube, well, then that's recorded. So in theory, that could be a podcast where you can then download the video from YouTube and strip out the audio and do a little editing. And it's really cool. Somebody who is not new to live streaming, but new to StreamYard, who you may want to check out, would be the awesome Kim Mattina, who does the Sweet Talk, where she was live streaming via Google Hangouts on air. And then she was using Zoom, which I'm not a fan of for, I'm not going to go there, but definitely check out her stuff. She's using StreamYard now, and I will link to Kim's stuff and the Sweet Talk in the show notes for this episode out of chrisnessy.com/143, where you'll also find a link to StreamYard. And that's my EdTech recommendation. I am very excited because I have another installment of Just Give It a Try. This is the segment where, because at the end of every episode, I tell you, using technology isn't difficult, just give it a try. This is your part of the episode where you can submit to the Flipgrid out at chrisnessy.com/Flipgrid and share a story of something you tried, whether it worked or not, in your classroom, your school, your district, and you can share your experience here on the podcast. And I've got a great story to share with you right now from Jennifer Conti. She is from Kent, Ohio. She is on Twitter. She is at Conti_Jen, and that is CONTI_JEN. And she's going to tell us about Adobe Spark and figurative language and Padlet. Take it away, Jennifer.
Hi, Chris, and all you House of Ed Tech listeners. This is Jennifer Conti from Immaculate Heart of Mary Grade School in Northeast Ohio, and this is my Just Give It a Try share. Last week, our fifth graders created Adobe Spark videos on figurative language. Each group was given a type of figurative language, and they had to create a definition or share the definition. They had to come up with 3 examples, and then they had to explain those examples of figurative language. Once they created those, they turned them into Google Classroom, and then the classroom teacher and I curated all of them in a Padlet so that the students could go in and they could comment and like the ones that they listened to. Adobe Spark was a new tool for them to use, which they enjoyed. They got to create and show what they know, and then it was nice for them to be able to give feedback to each other through Padlet. 2 very good tools, Adobe Spark for education and Padlet, that I would strongly recommend using in your classroom with your kids.
Thank you so much for saying that in, Jennifer. I really appreciate it. And I'm sure everybody who's listening also appreciates it too. And if you do appreciate it, make sure you go out and you connect with Jen Conti. If you are not, again, she is on Twitter at ContiJen. And if you're in Ohio, maybe you've seen her, or if you ever go to Ohio, I'm sure you could connect with her and maybe you can visit and talk about Padlet and Adobe Spark. And I just think that what she shared was really awesome because just so authentic to have kids collaborating and communicating. And I think those are 2 important verbs that need to be a part of any classroom. And obviously that student feedback element, very, very valuable. Thanks again, Jen. And if you've got something to say for Just Give It a Try, again, you can go out to chrisnessy.com/flipgrid and click on the Just Give It a Try grid, and your story will appear? Your story will be heard on a future episode of the podcast. Now I'd like to introduce you to this episode's House of Ed Tech VIP. Congratulations to Callie Irvin. Callie has a bachelor's degree in elementary education from Western Kentucky University, and she's currently pursuing her master's degree in library media education with an instructional technology emphasis. Callie also holds a certificate in American Sign Language. She's a level 1 and 2 Google certified educator and trainer, as well as an Apple educator. She is currently a digital learning coach serving 6 elementary schools, as well as the central office staff where she works. She absolutely loves instructional technology, and she loves helping other people do the same. Check out her website. Go to bit.ly/CallieIrvinTech, and that's KALIERVINTECH. And she is also on Twitter. Make sure you connect with her. She is at Callie Irvin, and both of those will be linked out in the show notes at chrisnessy.com/143. And Callie, congratulations. You are a House of Ed Tech VIP. Thanks again for checking out the House of Ed Tech podcast. Again, if this is your first time, I hope that you, well, if this was YouTube, I would tell you to smash the like button, but hopefully you hit that subscribe button. Thanks again to Mandi, Jennifer, and Brian for contributing to this episode. It was great to talk to Mandi about digital escape rooms, and it was great to get feedback and hear Jennifer's story, and also to hear it rain on top of Brian way up in northern Canada. Keep the conversation going for this episode. I would love to connect with you and hear your thoughts on the information and resources shared in this episode and any episode. Okay, so go out to chrisnessy.com/143 and you can leave a comment, or you can go to chrisnessy.com/feedback. If you enjoyed the House of Ed Tech podcast today, do me a favor. Go tell somebody else about the podcast. When this is done, call your best friend in education and tell them to listen to the show. Send them to chrisnessy.com/go, or take the phone out of their hand and show them how to subscribe to a podcast. You will change their life, and I'll be a small part of it. You can also become an awesome supporter of the House of Ed Tech podcast. My awesome supporter program is powered by Patreon, which allows a consumer of content like you to support a creator of content like me. Thank you to my awesome supporters, Anthony Arnault of the New Teacher Podcast, Eric Kurtz of ControlAltAchieve.com fame, Dan Gallagher from GallagherTech.edublogs.org, Carlos Garza, the Mr. G, host of the Aced Tech Podcast. Check out Peggy George at Classroom 2.0 Live. Thanks to Jen Giffen from Shooks and Giff, the podcast. You can go to shooksandgiff.com. Jeff Herb, my OG patron. Thank you. Check out all his content at instructionaltechtalk.com. Also hang out with Mike Messner on Twitter. He is at TeacherMike72. And my pal JP Presevento, host of the Bits and Bytes of Education podcast. Go check out all his amazing work at jpprez.com. And to Kyle Wilcox, thank you, sir. Connect with him on Twitter. He is at LevelUpEdTech. Thank you to all of my awesome supporters for all of your support. If you're interested yourself, you can go out to chrisnessy.com/awesome. The next episode of the House of Ed Tech is going to come out on, let me look at the calendar here. That's going to be November 10th, and that's going to be episode 144. This was fun. I love doing this. Thanks everybody for being here. Until next time, thank you for learning with me, and remember, using technology isn't difficult. Just give it a try.